Dr. Miller with a video on single versus two-leg or bilateral versus unilateral debate. And so there's some debate that's been around for a while about should we do single leg work or double leg work? Which is better for muscle development? What is better for strength and power? And the argument is in a lot of ways kind of silly in that both have value. And if you want to maximize one or the other, then that does require, some thoughtfulness giving about what you're maximizing it for. So for instance, if your goal, the singular goal in life is to increase your back squat strength, then doing two-legged work makes a lot of sense as your central way of building strength. If you're a single leg athlete, like a distance runner, it may make more sense to do more single leg work. It doesn't mean you don't do two-legged work. And we're going to talk about some of those considerations here in a little bit, but single leg work would be best. If you want to build muscle mass, single leg work and double leg work both can be valuable. Double leg work may be more beneficial in certain exercises because of the load being heavier. And so you're going to get more exposure to the load, if you will, a higher load with doing a two-legged squat. You're also going to get more neural flow. So let's talk about some of the issues that are associated with picking one or the other. So there's something called bilateral deficit. And if you're not familiar with this, years ago, did a study and saw this in cardiovascular function as well, where if you do single leg work and you quantify something related to it, such as VO2 max, so what's the aerobic capacity of one-legged work when you do a single leg work? What's the your maximum split squat strength? And then you total up the VO2 max on one leg with the other one, or the squat strength on one leg with the other, you would find that that number is greater than when you did double leg work. And there's a lot of reasons for this. When we think about strength and muscle activation, just think of flow. It's the same thing as VO2 max. So, there's only so much flow that you have, flow being neurodrive. And so if you do both legs at the same time, you're going to split the neurodrive. And this is where some of what we also get with, this transfer from one leg to another. When one leg is damaged, if one leg works out, there's some flow that still goes to the damaged leg, and so you still have some neurological adaptation that can occur, and flow to the muscles, which can save the muscles and hold on to some of the strength, this transfer of strength. And so there's, this flow is a big deal. So if we're in a two-leg activity, the flow's got to be higher because it's got to be driven to both limbs. Now, the benefit is that total flow is going to be increased significantly over time when you do two-legged work, and it should then be beneficial to do single-leg work because the total flow has been increased. The two-leg position, bilateral, it should be better when you do a unilateral, single-leg activity. Okay, the total load, again, at back squat, the total load, even though it may be less than the split squat loads combined, it's still in that given moment more load on the body than would be just doing a split squat. And so the total load is higher, again, demands more flow because there's two legs working. It also demands more flow, and so you have an increased neurodrive. Not surprising, whatever type of training you do, the law of specificity of training, if you do more bilateral work, you get more bilateral result, at least in trained people. In untrained people, you could have benefit from both, and there's research to kind of say yes and no, but more than likely, the probably is that in untrained people, it's not as big of a difference, but in trained people, it can be a bigger difference because now you're really tapping in that law of specificity much more than you would as an untrained person. And so, again, that bilateral flow then is going to be a big deal in developing total strength. Should extend to single leg. Single leg work, the benefit of that is the leg that's working gets all, or limb, gets all the flow, whether blood flow or neuro flow. And so that muscle can operate at its, you think of it as the maximal capacity of the muscle. Okay. And again, I'm using some very loose terms here, but you think of if you have a garden hose and you got to split it, half the flow is going to go one leg, half the other. Well, if I give the full flow to one leg, then that's maximal flow. That's also why bilateral deficit, I won't say that's also why, that's one of the reasons why bilateral deficit exists, is that the leg gets all that attention, the one that's working, and therefore can see better results by itself than when it has to, share with its, I have kids, and so when they share with one another, right, they don't like doing that. And so it's also beneficial. So that could be really good for growth, single leg, but so can double leg because the load is more. And so there's more tension. Single leg can be better because it gets more flow, which would be good for strength. But so is doing two legs because the flow now has to be jacked up even higher because there's two legs. So again, it's a silly argument in some respects just because one is better than the other. Now, I mentioned a situation earlier when one would be better than the other. If you're a two-legged athlete, spend most of your time, this sounds silly to say, but if you use both legs at the same time to do whatever you're doing, you're a rower or something like that, spend most of your time when things are in your specificity of training, you're in your special preparation phase, you're in your ramp up phase, be specific and use exercises that use both legs. Now you might do single leg work earlier on or as a supplement, but that may be a big deal. If you're a runner, distance runner, single leg work may be better just because running, sprinting is a single leg activity. You're only on one leg at a time. Those exercises are also easier to learn and harder to screw up. And so a back squat is harder to learn and easier to screw up than is a split squat. Okay, so again, contrasting these two, this is where single leg work is better. A lot of athletes, that's not fair. Some of the athletes I work with that I know I don't have a lot of time with, and they're a running athlete, I'm not going to teach them how to back squat. I don't want to. I don't want to deal with the mobility challenges. I don't want to deal with those things. In a 6-week span, I just might do split squats with them because I know I can still get them stronger. It's very specific to the movement patterns that they're incorporating in their sport. And there's not there's not a big learning curve for them to do it. I know they're going to be safe. And so that makes more sense for them. And they can extend that through their season. It saves it back. And if I don't see them anymore, I'm not worried about them squatting incorrectly and all these things. So that's a benefit of doing single leg work as well. The downside of single leg work is, especially people who are just getting started or maybe overweight, one leg is carrying the load. And if that knee is damaged on that leg, it's going to be very difficult for that person. So you're getting started. So this is where even incorporating machines might be a better idea because that's the beauty of machines. Again, machines are good, neither good nor bad. They're just tools. Use them at the right time. The machine allows you to modulate the load on the body, where when you're doing squatting work, you don't have a choice. You got to squat anything above your knees. So somebody who's a little bit bigger, somebody's out of shape, or if you're just getting started, you're not very strong, and that single leg work is harder because in two-legged work, you get both legs to move your mass. And in single leg work, you don't have choice. One leg's doing the work. That's why it's harder. It may be better to start out with a machine even, or a double leg activity like a goblet squat or something. You can do leg extension machine, which is appropriate at certain times, and hamstring. And then once you get strong enough, you can transition to single leg work. You could even do single leg work on machines. So, again, these are all, it's that it depends thing. It depends what's appropriate. If you're a distance runner, you don't have a lot of time for work out twice a week, you're not going to invest yourself in learning how to squat properly, do single leg work. If you're a soccer player, do both. You want to have greater neuro drive and more single leg work. You may do more single leg work closer to the season. Plus, it saves your back a little bit. I know, soccer players don't historically compress their spines a lot, but that's wear and tear. Doesn't mean you have to, avoid back squatting, but if you're not particularly good at it, spend a little bit more time with single leg work when you're beat up in the middle of a season. So again, these are tools to use. You have to know when to use them. If the goal is gaining more muscle mass, period, you just want to look better, gain bigger quads, whatever it is, then both are going to be valuable tools. If you do a traditional squat, back squat, wonderful. But then if you did some Bulgarian or rear leg elevated split squats, you can gain more range of motion, a little bit more stable position, and then add in that more volume for the quad. If you don't have a leg extension, you could do split squats in addition to the squats you did before, assuming that you've reached a certain time, certain amount of sets of squat, or any more would be a little silly. You could add this as supplemental work. It may not be the cornerstone, but it's going to be supplemental work to that bilateral or two-legged work where the tension is going to be higher. Okay, so that's kind of contrasting single, double leg work, when to use it. Is one good or bad? No, it depends. It depends on the situation and who you are and what you're trying to accomplish.